Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a really fascinating micro-mystery today. Sometimes the absolute best puzzles aren't in some grand detective novel, right? They're literally sitting in a glass box in someone's living room. Today, we're unpacking some brilliant observational notes from an author known as Ang. We're specifically looking at a journal entry titled Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 306. We're going to break down exactly what's happening in this aquatic setup, step by step, and see what we can uncover together.
Dear interweb, that tone is set right from the very first line, isn't it? It's intimate, it's consistent, and it honestly reads exactly like a scientist's field journal. And the fact that this is part 306, well, that tells us we are dropping squarely into a massive, long-term observation process. Ang is incredibly dedicated to documenting this journey, and in this specific entry, they've stumbled onto a behavioral anomaly that just needs solving. It totally gives our explainer today this fantastic, real-time detective vibe. We're not just reading dry facts here, we're actively following a train of thoughts.
Section 1. The scene of the crime, an abandoned cave.
So, before we can play detective, we gotta know exactly who we're dealing with. Ang has been carefully managing this aquarium, and recently there was a shift in the tank's social dynamics. Basically, the fish have been intentionally grouped into new pairs and larger groups, and our main characters navigating this whole transition are the Kribensis Cichlid, or scientifically, pelvicachromis-pulcher. So keep in mind, every single observation and hypothesis we're about to dig into is directly tied to the actions, or actually the inactions, of these specific cichlids.
Now, to help with this new social structure, the environment got a pretty sweet upgrade, a brand new purpose-built artificial shelter. But, well, things aren't really going according to plan. Look at the stark contrast here. On one hand, we have the intended shelter. It's this artificial terracotta pot, deliberately designed to be the perfect safe cave for the newly paired fish. But the reality? The actual shelter they're using is just the cramped space beneath the tank sponge filter. Instead of moving into this beautiful provided cave, a few of these cichlids are actively choosing to squeeze themselves right under a piece of filtration equipment.
Yeah, upon closer inspection, the verdict is crystal clear. That artificial terracotta cave seems entirely unoccupied. And honestly, if you ever had a pet, you totally know this feeling. You go out, you spend money on the nicest, cushiest bed, and they'd literally rather sleep in the cardboard box it came in. But in the precise world of fish keeping, an unoccupied shelter isn't just a minor annoyance. It's a real data point. It's a specific behavior that demands an explanation.
Section 2. The three suspects formulating hypotheses.
Now, Ang doesn't just sigh at the empty cave and walk away. No, they start formulating hypotheses, treating this whole thing like a genuine investigation. The central question driving this entry is actually pretty simple. Why won't these cichlids dig through the fine sand and take shelter in the cave? And that question is a massive clue. It reveals a critical detail about the setup. There is fine sand involved. To actually use that terracotta pot, it seems the fish would need to do a bit of digging or clearing. So Ang is wondering, why isn't that natural instinct to burrow in kicking in? To get to the bottom of this, Ang breaks down the potential answers into three primary guesses, or let's call them our suspects for this strange behavior. Suspect 1, a physical barrier involving the sand. Suspect 2, a biological issue, like some uncovered health problems with the fish. And suspect 3, simply that the reasons are completely beyond our understanding. Let's break down each of these hypotheses one by one to really get a feel for our observer's logic.
Okay, let's look at suspect number 1, the fine sand barrier. This is definitely the most practical environmental theory of the bunch. The idea here is that the fine sand might just be obscuring the opening of the artificial cave enough that it's difficult for the fish to even discover it's there. If the front door isn't obvious, they aren't going to use it, right? This hypothesis suggests that the fish might just need a tiny bit of manual intervention, a cleared path, to realize that the terracotta pot is actually a perfectly good home.
Moving on to suspect number 2, which shifts our focus away from the environment and directly onto the fish themselves, uncovered health issues. This one's a little more concerning. In animal husbandry, sudden behavioral changes, like totally ignoring a prime hiding spot just to go huddle under a filter, can sometimes be an early warning sign of stress or illness. Ang is being super astute here, keeping an open mind to the possibility that this isn't just a quirky preference, but an actual symptom. Are they acting weird because they just aren't feeling well? It's a really vital consideration when you're keeping fish.
And that brings us to suspect number 3, which honestly illustrates the deep humility you need when observing nature. Sometimes the reasons are just completely beyond our understanding, period. Despite our absolute best efforts to control an environment and measure the outcomes, animal behavior can be driven by deep-seated instincts, microscopic environmental shifts, or weird social cues that we just can't fathom or even detect. Eng readily acknowledges that the answer might not be A or B, but some complex factor X that just remains a total mystery.
Section 3. The next move, testing the environment. But a good observer doesn't just list out a bunch of theories and call it a day. To actually apply the scientific method here, Eng plans an immediate, practical intervention. Step 1. Manually clear the fine sand from the opening of the artificial cave. This is a direct, hands-on test of our first suspect, the fine sand barrier hypothesis. By removing the obstacle, Eng is testing if visibility and accessibility were the real issues all along. Then comes Step 2, which is the crucial follow-up. Observe how the Kribensis cichlids react to the newly cleared entrance. It's time to shift from just watching to a controlled action plan. Action, followed by careful, patient observation.
Which brings the narrative right back to the author's exact words, setting up a perfectly agonizing cliffhanger for this behavioral experiment. Eng writes, "Let's proceed with clearing the opening of the artificial cave first and see how this goes. Till the next post." It's such a great reminder of the sheer patience required in both fish keeping and scientific observation. You make one tiny tweak to the environment, and then, well, you wait. The results are rarely instantaneous. They require time, letting things settle, and a whole lot of further documentation. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? I think it really comes down to the immense value of methodical observation. Will clearing the fine sand actually solve the mystery, or is it going to turn out to be some underlying health issue, or maybe something entirely beyond our understanding that's keeping these cichlids crammed under that sponge filter? While we are going to have to wait for Eng's next journal entry for the definitive answer, this explainer really highlights how a simple everyday occurrence can be transformed into a deeply fascinating study of environment and behavior. It certainly leaves you eager to look a little more closely at the subtle, weird behaviors of the animals in your own life, doesn't it? Thanks so much for joining me for today's explainer, and hey, keep observing.